Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Jim Nowakowski again. Welcome, everybody. We've got a nice packed room here. It's going to be exciting. We're talking about making more sense of social media for business. This is our special COVID edition. I'm so glad you're here this morning. I'm going to start a little early to get everybody rocking and rolling and make sure you can hear me all right. If you've got any questions, put them in the question box. This is IDCEC, NKBA, and AIA approved. This is an approved webinar. I know many of you are architects and designers and want your credits, as well as kitchen and bath designers. This is all approved, and you'll be ready to get your credits. If you need help reporting your credits or you need a certificate, just let us know. We'll be happy to help you through that process. As an AIA provider, we go through a great extent to get these courses approved by the AIA. And this special edition of Making More Sense of Social Media was approved by the AIA last year. And it was very, very successful. We've presented it a couple of times. And this is the third time, and it's been updated. We update it every time because COVID changes all the time. It's also IDCEC approved, which means you can get credit with the IDCEC and NKBA as well. We take a different approach with this course because social media has generated a lot of attention and interest. I remember when it was first born. We're going to talk about that. And in understanding how to navigate your business amongst these many, many, many platforms, as you'll see, can be overwhelming. One of the biggest challenges you have is time. You just don't have the time to do everything. And we're going to talk about that. And the webinar is going to try to clarify mainly the platforms that you're focused on. But I want to tell you right now, the most important platform you have in terms of social media, do not fall off your chairs, ladies and gentlemen, is your website. Because LinkedIn is LinkedIn, Twitter is Twitter, etc., Instagram. But your platform to engage your customers in business is your website. We're going to talk about how social media relates to that. And because of COVID, it's even more important about these channels on how to navigate them. By the way, this course will be available in a PDF file. If you email me afterwards, we'll be happy to send you PDF slides. But I encourage you to take notes, ask questions in the question box. I'll be monitoring that throughout the session. So what we want to do, first of all, is define what we mean by social media and how it's influenced both business and everything else as a medium. And this includes introduction of social media sites for business. Now, most of these, when they emerged on the scene, they were called social media sites. They would not even accept advertising. If you remember when Facebook was launched, they abhorred advertising. They just didn't want to have advertising. And now you can't find a channel without advertising. Well, you could, and we're going to talk about that. But in any case, YouTube, for example, is threatening, the networks because you've got these YouTubers broadcasting and, getting millions of followers. So what we want to do today is look at the guidelines on a successful strategy in this very, very, very disruptive environment. So I'm going to show you some real-life examples. We're going to show you how to develop a plan, begin with the audience targeting, etc. But what we really want to do is focus on social media with business and how it relates to your business and your architects, your engineers, your interior designers. I looked at a lot of you before as much as I could because some of you used your Gmails and AOL accounts. I always like to start a story. This is a pre-COVID story. But I tell it to you because I want to show you the world before and after. In Vegas, pre-COVID, the Jersey Boys were playing. My wife and I went there. Travis Crowe, who played the lead part in this version of the Jersey Boys, did a terrific with Frankie Valli. He did a terrific impression of Frankie Valli's songs. Just great. The next day, I'm shopping with the wife in Vegas, and I decide, you know what? I want to talk to this guy because it was I want to give him a compliment. So I find him on Twitter. I tweet him. Within 2 minutes, he's tweeting me back saying, Jim, thanks for being in the audience. Within another minute, the producer of that show tweeted in, glad you were in the audience, Jim. Glad you and your wife enjoyed it. And within 5 minutes, the Arizona Travis Crowe Clower, however you pronounce his name, fan club was tweeting and retweeting my tweet about how much I enjoyed the show. That was pre-COVID. And I'm not saying it changed, but I'm just saying in pre-COVID, you can touch anyone. Whether or not they touched you back remain to be seen, right? It really depends on who you're trying to touch. But quite honestly, with social media, especially Twitter, you can, in fact, touch anyone. But the question in business is, what do you do once you touch them? Do you want to touch them? Especially with COVID, because what COVID did is that it just wrecked everything. It wasn't, I'm going to go on record now and say it wasn't so much the virus. Yeah, we want to be safe. We want to social distance, all that stuff. But the government's reaction to businesses and locking down businesses was detrimental to your business, my business, everyone's business. And I can't explain why they did that, but the fact of the matter is they did do it. And we in business have to deal with these variables, don't we? And that's why social media and your website is so important. For example, one of the things I sent out when this thing hit is we never close, by the way, and I can tell you that throughout here. We actually take very good precautions. And I decided I'm going to send out this tweet. I like to tweet a lot to see what happens. And after wiping down my desk this morning, yes, we're still going on in shifts, I thought, you smelled that? Because Lysol has a smell, doesn't it, ladies and gentlemen? You smell that? It smells like victory. And if you know the name of the movie that was from, you smell that? It smells like victory. Put it in the question or the chat box and I'll send you a $5 Starbucks card. Seriously. Because that's what it did. So I'd like to welcome everybody in the audience. I have a lot of people in the audience. The ones that used your domain, I know some of you came in late and I wasn't able to get those. I apologize for that. But some of you who gave me your domain, I did look at your websites. I did see you're doing social media. I'm really glad you're in the audience. But I also have a lot of Gmails, Hotmails, AOL.com, etc. People in the audience who are using their personal emails. This is brought to you by KB Resource. KB-Resource, which is a hub. It's a media outlet that does things a little differently. And I encourage you to visit that website and especially to look at KBtivity. That's the designers section of their website where you can actually post your things. I see some latecomers joining us. Welcome. Thank you for coming. I appreciate you being there. I said I'm going to define my terms, and I didn't say that. Socrates and Aristotle said that you have to define your terms. If you don't know what you're talking about, it's very difficult to talk about it. And that's one of the problems with especially with design. Oh, that's a good design. Well, how do you define good, right? So what is social media? What really is social media? And how does this virus thing change that? If you look up what social media is, it will tell you it's a form of electronic communication as websites for social networking, microblogging, through which users create online communities to share information, blah, blah, blah. In other words, your website is clearly defined in this definition. And I told you once, and I'm going to tell you again and again and again, the most important social media website you have is, in fact, your website. Inderia, I see you in the audience. Welcome. Welcome again. It's my Canadian architect friend. He comes to my webinars. Welcome. Anyway, when you define your website as a social media site, things start to change. Because media means any mass communication. Did you know, for example, television is a social media website? Well, what do you mean, Jim? You can't communicate with people. Well, sure you can. They give you 800 phone numbers. You can watch an infomercial if you'd like. There's tons of things going on, television, radio, newspapers. Those are all designed to bring people together because social is relating to society and its organizations and an organization of mass communication. We think when we say social media, what pops into your mind? Facebook, Instagram, whatever, right? Those are what normally people have come to define as social media. But guess what? They're wrong. In fact, if you look at the rise of social media, and this is from not me, this is not Jim Nowakowski saying this. This is McKinsey, one of the big consulting companies in the world, talks about the rise of social media. Okay, if you look from the bottom up, radio took 38 years to reach 50 million people. 38 years. Think about that. We take radio for granted. In fact, I'm not saying I was around when radio was invented, but I remember as a young man listening to radio shows, right? Where you had no visuals. You had to use you ready? Your imagination. There's a big term floating around everywhere now. Let's reimagine things. You don't reimagine anything. You either imagine or you don't. Let's be clear on definitions, right? Well, radio took 38 years to get 50 million people. Why? Because there were no radios. You either had to buy your own, make your own, or whatever. And then as it started to proliferate, and there's great stories on this. If you watch the history of country music, they talk about how country music grew in the United States via the radio. Television, by contrast, only took 13 years to get 50 million people. Now, I was around when they invented television. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I was not working. I was a little kid, but I remember television. Now, if you were in the agency business, the agency people, when it was invented, were going crazy because they could put a box in everybody's home, and guess what? Broadcast commercials. Yes, they could start selling things right in the person's home in this box, right, called television. And that's exactly what they did. And if you look at the history of television and commercials originally were integrated with the show. In other words, if you had a sponsor, sometimes the sponsor actually worked in his commercial within the program. The iPod took only 4 years, the internet took 3 years, Facebook took 1 year, and Twitter less than a year to reach 50 million people. And of course, now we know there's billions of people in the world who all have cell phones, who all can use Facebook. And that's a wonderful thing because that phone, that mobile device, which was originally described as a phone, it's really not a phone, is it? It is a phone, but it's much more than a phone. It's a computer. It's access to the internet. It's everything you need to do business today. And that's why mobile, and there's more mobile phones in the world than internet connections. That's why that kind of thing in the world is very important. So, coronavirus, social, physical distancing, self-quarantine, these are words we really want to understand if we're going to understand how to deal with this thing in business. And because it changes so fast, I don't think there's anybody in the audience that would argue the fact that every day something changes as far as this COVID thing is concerned. Rules change. Counties are opening up now. Then they close the next day. It's very, very difficult to keep up. Even with the idea of what the CDC rules, it's very difficult. But that's okay because things change, but they really don't change as fast as you think they change. In fact, one of the sayings is, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I don't know if you believe that, but if you look at how information, which is the business you're in, no, I know. Jim, I'm an architect. Jim, I'm an interior designer. No, Jim, I run a showroom. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't really care what you say your business is. Your business is information. And unless you learn how to control information, how to digest it, consume it, and redistribute it, you're not going to do business. You might exist, but you're not going to have a booming business. If you look at the left graph there, they used to use word of mouth spreading out. Now I use webinars, right? In social media, it takes seconds to explode and something to go viral, right? That's how fast things spread. In fact, when Twitter was invented, the National Geographic Survey, when they had that tsunami, when they had that eruption in Japan, people knew about it before the official word came from the government that there was the tsunami in Japan. Because people are actually in tune doing things on social media, which presents the problem. The problem is misinformation, not information. There's tons of information, or as the Signal in the Noise says, the author says in there, you have to really filter through the noise in order to understand the message. So if you look at the right, now what I just put up there in terms of bullet points, it's great to know all these things exist. We got to figure out our goals. We got to figure out what to do. But unless you have a strategy, unless you know what you want to do with your website, with Twitter, with Instagram, all you're doing is wasting time. And ladies and gentlemen, you don't have time to waste. Listen, I am so grateful you're here with me for an hour today. Hopefully you'll stay. I see more people coming in. Thank you very much. But if you understand what I'm trying to do in this hour, because that's all I have, I appreciate you being here, and secondly, I want to give you some information you can use. And the best piece of information, one of the best, is that your website is a social media site, and you better pay attention to that website because you want to dominate Google searches. That's the essence of this thing. Now, there's all sorts of business guidelines. I've been on tons of webinars. I've interviewed designers in person, and that's great. Right? These are all the wonderful business guidelines. We want to practice good hygiene. We want to wash. I just had a plumber come in just now, no mask, nothing there, because he's replacing a piece of equipment in my home, right? He came in, no mask, no home, big deal, right? There it is. Some people do it. I'm not afraid of it, right? It's a virus. And if you maintain social distancing, which we did, everything should be fine. He leaves, we wipe down the counters, we're all set. You want to practice safety, but safety should not, as I heard on the radio the other day, it's not a matter of risk. You cannot have zero risk. There's no such thing as zero risk. If you want zero risk, just don't, shut your computer off and stay in your home. But that's not what business is about, is it? Business is about doing things, making money, helping people. And since everything is social, you want to understand these platforms because these platforms promise you the world. A good example is Houzz. Houzz is a social media platform, right? Many of you are on Houzz. When I visited your websites and in the past, you maintain a Houzz presence. Well, that's great. But what do you get out of that? What is your benefit out of that? And if you say business, that's me applauding to you. But you have to really understand where business come from and how they find you in order to evaluate a platform like Houzz. Because all you're doing, when you put your stuff on a platform and not on your website, you're giving everybody the opportunity to see what you do and take what you do. So you have to be careful. Social media is great, but you have to be careful. Because there's actually, right, misinformation out there. Social distancing doesn't mean business distancing. I wrote a blog about that. It's one of my very, very famous blogs that gets read a lot. It doesn't mean business distancing, right? We have senders. Remember, it's about information. You have a sender, receiver, and then a receiver of the sender. You become a sender and receiver. It sounds like I'm reciting something out of a skit, right? But I'm not. Sometimes you're a sender. Sometimes you're a receiver. You have to be both. You cannot just be broadcasting your messages and expect everybody to say, "Oh, look at what Bonnie's saying." You can't expect that. You cannot expect that. And you use social media as a tool to do it. Did you know that there are over 210 social media websites listed in Wikipedia? 210. You know what's really scary? Is not that there are 210. What's really scary is that there's 349 footnotes explaining the 210 websites, social media platforms. Ladies and gentlemen, you cannot keep up. You cannot keep up. TikTok just exploded a year or two ago, right? I didn't see anybody pointing to TikTok from your websites. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't see anybody using TikTok like you do an Instagram, like you do something like that, right? I didn't see anybody using Klout anymore. Klout stopped. TwitPic stopped. If you look at the social media sites today, which we're going to explore in a minute, 2 of them are now obsolete. Google Plus is gone. Tumblr is gone. You cannot keep up. And there's lots of opinions on, well, we should be using Instagram, Jim, or we should be using Pinterest. I love Pinterest. Great. You know what? The thing about opinions is everybody has them, right? Or as they say in Latin, de gustibus non est disputanum. You cannot argue about taste. But you can argue about the facts. If you're using a social media platform and it's going great guns for you, I want you to keep using it, but just keep this in mind. How much time are you spending on it, and what is the return on investment? What is the return on your investment? Zoom is a social media channel. No, it's not, Jim. It's a video channel. No, it's not. When the virus hit, Zoom had already existed. But when the virus hit, Zoom zoomed to the top. There was GoToMeetings, there was Microsoft Teams. There's all these platforms that brought people together virtually that kind of like just maybe they fell on the side, maybe they didn't get so much, but Zoom zoomed to the top. Why? Because they made it easy for people to connect. Social media means social media. It means people talking to people. And Zoom brings you face to face with people. So do the other platforms. I'm not promoting Zoom over GoToMeetings. I love GoToMeetings. We use GoToWebinars. Zoom has a webinar component. A major association is using that as a component. And quite frankly, let's concentrate on social media for business. I don't want to talk about what you do with your family, your friends, whatever. That's not why we're here. We're here to talk about business and how you use social media for business. As they say in The Godfather, it's hard to separate business. You know, this is nothing personal, it's just business, right? Isn't that what you hear in The Godfather? Guess what? Business is personal and personal is business, especially after this virus, especially. So, we're going to start now exploring social media channels. If you got any questions, please put them in the question box. I do not see any hands raised. Quite excited about that. That means I'm getting through. Keep this in mind at all times. I'm the sender, you're the receiver. If you want to send me something, put it in that question box and I'll receive it and I'll respond to it. Okay? As much as I'd like to open up all your microphones, it ain't going to work with 40 people in the room. It's just not going to work. So we're following the rules of etiquette and put your questions in the question box. The dirty little secret about social media, it's not about talking. It's about listening. As Don Tickle taught me, I'm going to quote him later on in the presentation, you can't learn anything when you're talking. So social media is about listening. And take any platform you're on and go on there and listen. All these platforms have search tools. You can search in, kitchen patterns, building materials. You can do searches on these platforms and listen to what people are saying. I'm not talking about the day-to-day BS that you hear on these social media platforms when they're making it quote-unquote personal. I'm talking about business-related items. LinkedIn is the platform for business mostly, but these others are invaluable in what you're trying to do with your website. You should subordinate these platforms to your website. I remember when Facebook came online, I had two manufacturers who said, we will never need another website. We're just going to build everything on Facebook. It's the perfect medium, and it's free. Guess what happened? Facebook changed their algorithm, and it's no longer not free. It's no longer really the preferred venue, so they went back to websites. Platforms change the way they work. Platforms change rules. Platforms are platforms. They're businesses like you and I, and they can make the rules. So if you count on a platform like an Instagram or anything else, you're really making a huge mistake by not counting on your website in front of that. Your website is the key to the puzzle of social media. I'm telling you right now. Listen, decide, and act. And what does that mean? Ask yourself at every moment, is what I'm doing necessary? That just doesn't apply to social media. That applies to anything you do. This webinar, I asked myself before I decided to schedule it early, this year and late last year, redo these webinars again. Is this necessary? I believe it's necessary, ladies and gentlemen. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have the people in the audience like I do. But what you need to do when you ask that question is you need to eliminate unnecessary assumptions. Like, oh boy, I got to be on Instagram to share what I'm doing. I want to be a thought leader on Instagram. The question is, can you be a thought leader on Instagram? So I didn't say this, Marcus Aurelius said this, and that's very important. Why? Because while some of the unnecessary assumptions you make, right, some of those unnecessary assumptions you are making now may be in fact unnecessary. They may not be necessary, right? What are the assumptions? Jim Mattis, former Secretary of Defense, wrote a great book called Call Sign Chaos. In that book, this is a quote from the book. Think about this. Digital technologies can falsely encourage remote staffs to believe that they possess a God's eye view of combat. Digital technologies do not dissipate confusion. The fog of war can actually thicken when misinformation is instantly applied. And ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly what happens on social media channels. Misinformation. What you really want to do is understand that this misinformation can explode against you. So you got to be careful when you pull the trigger on a post, on anything you do. Because it is sometimes misinformation. Who do you believe, right? Well, on our website, on your website, hopefully you have forms so you can tell when the robot fills out the form because it's all Greek, isn't it? No offense, but it is. It's all Russian or Greek. So the problem before COVID was that if everyone thinks they're a kitchen bathroom designer, an architect, or whatever, because of the internet, because that's what the internet did, ladies and gentlemen, it leveled the playing field. Anybody can get on the internet now and look like a designer, look like an architect, look like you. How do you expect people to react to you when you tell them that you are in fact a kitchen designer, an architect, or whatever? That was the problem before COVID struck. And then when COVID struck, it actually intensified that problem because everybody went digital and everybody is saying anything they can do, not only to talk to people, because, ladies and gentlemen, we're social animals. You and I are social animals. We need to talk to each other. Look at what the COVID and the government rules are doing to children today. And and I'm not trying to make this a political statement, and I'm not. I'm talking about the psychological effects of being non-social, which is why social media is so important. And your website is so important, especially for business. Because the problem really is if everyone is sheltering in place or coming out now, how do you overcome social distancing and start doing business again? This is the problem. And the way you do it is by hatching a strategy that subordinates social media to your website. Before COVID, it took 6 to 8 touches to generate a sales lead. That was then. You know why? It's even worse now. Not only that, the way you generate leads, strictly because you can't go to trade shows, because you can't go visit a rep, the architect's offices are still closed. Look at New York. I was talking to an architect the other day, and they were telling me it's so sad to see, Manhattan, a ghost town. Still. How do you do business in an environment in a ghost town? Well, what you really want to do now with this virus thing, you have to really understand that people are still afraid, and you have to overcome fear. Fear is what that's why people don't want to do business. They're afraid. Well, what does that mean, they're afraid? Does that mean that they're afraid they'll catch the virus if they take a mask off? Are they afraid that I can't do business anymore because the government says I can't, I only have to be a essential business? What is an essential business? We talked about defining our terms. Is your business essential? Well, I would argue that it depends how you define it. I think everyone in my audience is an essential business. Why? Because you're an entrepreneur, you have accountability, some of you have employees, and you have responsibilities. So you're an essential business. You have to figure out how to do business. This is an email I received from someone that saw me at KBIS before they had, I don't know if you tried to attend that virtual KBIS show, but it was just a disaster. And they spoke to me afterwards. I used to speak at the Voices of the Industry many times. And after I talked to them, after the virus hit, she sent me this wonderful email. And after she spoke to her cabinets. She's an elderly, watches her money. Designer came and told my friend that 20 years, etc. You can read this on your own if you request the PDF file. But one of the things that I get pleasure on is helping people understand how to penetrate fear. Because that's really what it is. And to overcome fear, you have to have exposure. And to have exposure, you have to dominate the website. You have to dominate the internet. And you do that by having rich content on your website and help them overcome. You have to touch these people virtually before you can touch them physically again. I remember in March last year, or April last year, when we landed on a client. Believe it or not, we landed business during COVID. And he invited me to go to the meeting. And he said, would you mind coming out to see me? I said, absolutely not. I said, I'll wear 3 masks, whatever you want. And we went out there. It was a horrible 2 hours. I blogged about this afterwards. It was a plea for ending masks in business meetings. Because if we sat at a table 6 feet apart, and I still have to wear the mask. Have you ever tried to wear a mask for 2 hours in a business meeting? It's very difficult. That's why I feel sorry for people who work at like a Costco or someplace where they're wearing a mask all day long. I just saw a study about trying to run with a mask on. It's horrible. Anyway, that's why you have to touch people virtually first. And I'm all for masks. I'm not wearing a mask now because I'm talking to my computer and I don't think my computer is infected. But the phone is your greatest overlooked social media asset too. The phone, your phone in your hand, is a social media asset. You can call anybody up you want. You can talk to people. We were doing major research last week and I made 25 phone calls and I learned so much from the people that I talked to. I spent 3 hours on the phone trying to find the right people for this piece of research we're doing for a major plumbing company. And I talked to people who answered the phone and learned just a hell of a lot. And you're going to say, well, Jim, that's wasting time. No, it's not. It's planting seeds in my head about what the business environment truly is. Social media channels do that too. You can listen to us. But the difference is, on a phone, you can tell a person's sincerity by their voice. You know this. You know when you call someone up, you can immediately tell if they're doing something else, don't you? Can't you tell that? They immediately do something else. You can tell they lose focus. And what I do is I said, I can call you at another time if I know you're busy, and they drop what they're doing and listen, or they say, please do so. In social media channels, there's no tone. You can only read the words, and then you interpret it as you intend to interpret it. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the greatest error that we make, is the interpretation of what we're reading, based on our own feelings and our own prejudices. So your real advantage is your website. So you have to make sure your website is relevant, very relevant. Okay? Overcoming fear. Be open to discourse. This means being open and respecting the channels your audience is using. Do you know, for example, how many of your audiences and your customers are using Instagram? How many are using Twitter? How many are using Facebook? Do you follow all your customers? Do all your customers follow you? These are basic questions, and you should know the answers to that, because that's how you're going to overcome the fear. Because if they're not using those channels, why even talk to them on those channels? Before COVID, 70% of people, B2B people, got their information from Google searches. That's before they touched a magazine, a rep. They would go to Google first. What do you think that percentage is today after COVID? I've seen figures as high as 90 to 95% go to Google first. If you Google B2B Never Sleeps, you'll see a great blog by a guy named Jim Nowakowski that talks about this. This is before COVID. After COVID, it's even worse. They're using Google all the time. So if you're not on page 1 with what you do, nobody goes to page 2. I go to page 10 sometimes because I'm a curious guy, but nobody just starts flipping pages on Google. It's not like reading a magazine. And most of the people have ad blockers, so they ignore the ads. What do you think is going to be in the future when we start opening up? You think that search on Google is going to decrease? It's only going to increase. And now there's Siri. You ask your phone questions and Siri delivers the result. In B2B, audiences influence the products and your services' path to purchase. If you Google what you do, architecture in Tacoma, Washington, let's say you do that, you're going to see what Google delivers and how that influences people's choices. You can use that to your advantage. This is what I mean about listening. This is what I'm saying when I'm saying listen to these social media channels, including Google. Wait, Jim, Google's a search engine. It's not a social media channel, is it? Where do you think they get their information from? Not just other websites, by the way, they do. But they listen to the social media channels. They actually deliver tweets. So sometimes it's just more convenient to do it this way. But that doesn't change the facts that people are jumping around more than ever before. You know, in the old days, you had 3 television stations. Now you got over 200. People have enormous choice. One of the choices they use is Google or Bing, right, or Yahoo. But Google dominates search. So if you're not on page 1 on Google, you're just being overlooked and you're losing business. So what should you do? What's part of your strategy? Call up your customers. Call them up. Talk to them. How's it going? How's business? You know, what are you doing to manage your business? How can I help? Those are the most famous words and the most useful words I have found in my business career. How can I help you? Most of the time people say you can't. Most of the time people say I wish you could. Most of the time people say I really don't know. That leads to dialogue. Dialogue leads to conversation and more conversation. And guess what dialogue leads to? Opportunity. And for prospects, do the same thing. Well, Jim, they won't take my calls. Depends how you left word to call. Depends how you leave them a message. Learn how to do these things. The phone is it's a very important tool. Write them a letter and then call them. Send them an email and then call them. But you have to keep moving. You cannot rest. Absolute rest is death. If you know who said that, put it in the question mark. Pardon me. You have to change the conversation from the virus to you. You have to change the conversation. You cannot focus on that. Look at what this guy did. This guy used a bucket truck to visit his mother on the 3rd floor when the virus broke out last year of her assisted living home. You know what they did to assisted living places. And this guy rented a bucket truck to visit his mom. You talk about a great move. You talk about something that went viral on the social media for a while, right? And I'm not saying you should do this, rent a bucket truck to visit your customer. But I'm saying think about what you should do to be innovative. Do not wait and let the virus control. We have a saying at Interline, don't let the software control you. You should control the software. This is the same thing with social media channels. Understand transition from 30-second to bullet points. People don't want to waste time, right? 30-second spots. People say, don't write long copy, Jim. Don't write long copy. Just give me the bullet points. Well, here's your question. Would you rather be operated by the doctor who read the book or the bullet points? That's a trick question. Of course you want the guy who read the book, right? But the point is, in digital, you can go deeper regardless of channel. Well, Jim, Twitter only limits me to 280 characters. Yeah, I got that. But what you tweet should always lead back to your website. Most of the time. I shouldn't say always. What you post on LinkedIn should always, I shouldn't say always, lead back to your website. Those are just tools to bring people back to your website. Because why? Google reads your website. And here's a secret. Google reads everything. You can have bullet points or you can have an 18-page essay on your topic. Google will read all of that. And when Google reads it, they index it. When they index it, it goes into the algorithm of people who are searching for things like you wrote. It's that, ladies and gentlemen, I am not saying it's that simple, but I'm saying it's that simple. The more content you have, the better off you are because Google reads everything. You might start out with bullet points and then say, read more. In social, you should listen to the prospects on that channel about the topic you're talking about. And the point is to use the channel as an appropriate thing for your objectives. Educate people. Knowledge erases fear. Can I say that again? Knowledge erases fear. You have to overcome the fear. So write blogs on your website. Publish articles on media outlets that relate to your industry. There's plenty of them out there. There's new ones, ladies and gentlemen, there's new ones springing up every day. Why? Because people are driving for business. And every architect in the audience, every designer in the audience, every showroom in the audience, you're competing with vast numbers of people just like you. The only way you differentiate yourself is through assuming a leadership position. The only way you assume that position is when Google starts putting you on page 1. In my business, in marketing and sales and things like that, it takes a long time to get on page 1 because you need the content, you got to write the content, Google's got to find the content. But it's not impossible. It's not impossible. One of the things you and I and everyone else in that audience talks about is price. Jim, how much should I charge for my services? And this is not the webinar to talk about price. But that's a very, very, very common question. Am I charging too much, too little, whatever? I think I'm going to do a blog and actually a webinar on pricing. But if that's really one of the great questions and you don't talk about price on your website, right? I'm not saying give a price. I'm just saying discuss a price. In an indirect way, in a direct way, because I'm in marketing and sales, I can talk about it directly. So if you Google never lower your price, you're going to see on number 1, page 1, Google will give you a blog that I wrote a few years ago. Takes a while to get up there, but that now. So when I talk to people now about our pricing for our services, I just say, well, I just can't lower my price. I can do something else with you, but I can't lower it. Why can't you lower it? Well, I can't. Read my blog. Never lower your price. So be a leader in the conversation and publish articles and other things. Overcoming fear. A negative can be a positive. It's called listening and then adapting. For example, we did an email for a client that resulted in this was an email trying to get business for a specification for one of our plumbing clients. And the programmer comes running and said, Jim, there's a guy on the phone. He's really mad. I took the call. He said, Jim, he says, he couldn't talk. He was so angry. Where did you get my name? And I said, well, we got it from a list from a construction database who identified you as the project manager. And there was this pause. There was this just pregnant pause. And I said, you there? And he goes, I have to thank you. I go, what do you mean, thank me? He says, I've been trying to find out for the last hour where these people have gotten my name because I've been getting inundated with emails. I just don't know what to do. Where the heck did this come from? And you're the first guy that really answered my phone and told me where it came from. So I want to thank you. I said, no, that's all right. I'm going to take you off the list because obviously you don't want to be on this list. No. You can take me off, but let me tell you who the guy you want. And he gave me the name of the person. This is for Kroger stores. And we were trying to get into the guy who runs specifications for the Kroger stores in the United States, right? So I hit the wrong target, but he gave me the right target because even though it was negative, you turned it into a positive. You too can do this. There's no such thing as a no. The sale begins when the customer says no. Google that. I won't come up, but Elmer Letterman will. It's a great book now out of print. When somebody tells you no, it's not really for the reason you think it is. There's always a reason why, and listening will help you uncover that reasons. In fact, 7 things to do when you lose a pitch is another one. I've had over 10,000, 15,000 views on that. I'm not saying that to just say that. I'm just telling you that content works. And one of the things we do here at Interline is we practice what we preach. I'm telling you to blog. I'm telling you to listen. We should do that. Be a counter talker. Listen to webinars and then share. Do you know the explosion of webinars via Zoom that are going? It's just unbelievable. There's so much information. Some are good, some are bad. But you should cherry pick those and then share the information. Oh, tell your audience, I heard this on this webinar and I don't believe this. Or blog about it. React to the webinars. Do your own webinar. Publish your notes in webinars as blogs. Interact with the webinar. I have met people that there's no way, unless the virus hit, I would have ever met and talked to on webinars. I'm talking about famous people. People, who do great things in the world. They're on these blogs, they're on these webinars now, pardon me. And they get into the room and they start talking to people like us. And I've asked questions that are answered on these webinars. Because I listen and I ask intelligent questions, right? Not just to be there. Interact and keep that conversation moving forward. Know your brand identity. We have great brands in the audience. If you look at the brands in the audience today, these are some of them. And again, I apologize. I don't have everyone in there. Some of you registered later and came in later, so I apologize. But don't try to be everything to everybody. Stay true to how you are. I looked at your webinars. I've seen your brand identities. I've looked at them. So, and it is what it is. But what you have to understand is that clients repeatedly get hammered when they leave their core competency behind. When you're trying to do everything for everybody because business is bad and I just got to hit anything that moves, you're going to hurt yourself. Stay true to your brand. Do not abandon your core proposition. It will lead to failure. So what is your core proposition? That's the thing you have to ask yourself, right? What is your core? Is it stated clearly on your website? So do some research. And instead of bemoaning our fate, find out what people need and give it to them. Just give them what they want. That's a great feeling. Don Tickle was one of the greatest salesmen I ever met in my life, and he took me down to the High Point Market one year. And as we entered the High Point Market, which, by the way, I've never seen before, it makes Neocon look pathetic. Not pathetic, but it's very different because it's a city. It's not just the merchandise mart with all the showrooms. It's a city. So one of the things to really realize when Don came in is we're walking into these massive showroom buildings. It's a building 9 stories high or 4 stories, 5 stories, loaded with stuff. Just beautiful fabrics and furniture, and any number of things for that people use in the home. He turns around, and this guy was 75 when I met him, and he's a spry guy, and I couldn't keep up with him. I think I was 65 at the time. He turned around at me suddenly and he looked and he said, "Hey, Jim, you see anything you need?" And I looked at him and I said, I thought for a minute and I immediately got it. It's not about what you need. It's about what you want. And ladies and gentlemen, you're in the want business. Well, no, Jim, everybody needs interior design. No, they don't. Oh, Jim, everybody needs architect. No, they don't. It's what they want. Once you understand that, you're on the road to overcoming inertia. Because people need certain things. They need food. They need water. They need society. Hence the Zoom rooms, right? They need to talk to people. They need to be with people. That's what they need. But what they want is totally different. And you know what's going on. If you're a designer today, you're probably working on remodeling and you're going crazy. I talked to a remodeler the other day. He's 18 months out. He's booked for 18 months. Okay? He's booked. So if someone in his audience or near his audience or in his zip code, you think for a moment they're going to wait 18 months for him to do it? If he doesn't staff up, he's going to lose that business to someone else. That's what I'm talking about. Need. It's not what you need, it's what you want. And if you want your home remodeled, because suddenly you're not going to go to the office anymore, suddenly you need to create a room in your home that's a little bit soundproof from the dogs and such, you're going to need to talk to a remodeler. And as the saying goes, right, if you're not there, someone else is going to get the business. And to do that, you have to take away the fear. So practice doing that. Practice doing that. Pick your targets. If you fail, fail fast. And keep going. You're going to fail, but what does failure breed? Success. So it used to be ready, aim, fire. But that's being changed to ready, fire, aim, fire again. Quickly. Move quickly, neatly, and efficiently. That's the important thing. There's a blog on my website getting people to pull the trigger. So, let's go through a quick example of what I'm talking about because time is short. You can talk about commercial or residential. Residential is a little easier because you pick zip codes, but I took a commercial project like this, which is really Edwards Hotel Healthcare Center. And if you pick a commercial, like healthcare or an educational facility or a business, most businesses will have websites. Most businesses with websites have, in fact, if you look on the bottom, social media channels. When you're doing your research to target these people, you have to look at the website and you have to look at the channels. In this case, their website contains much information, including every website I visited lately, except ours, has this information, latest COVID-19. That's great. It's a hospital. You want to remain safe. Sometimes in a hospital in the early days of the virus, you couldn't even get in. My wife went for an exam. I couldn't even get in. I couldn't get in. They made me sit in the parking lot. It was crazy. All right. But I understand it. Of course, you got to understand. There's not much you can do about it. If you go to their Facebook page, you start looking at their Facebook page and start reading. Remember, you're not responding. You're doing research. Businesses have Facebook page. What is your strategy about this? Should you follow them? Should you find something on Facebook to talk to them about on Facebook? Should you become a fan? Should you invite them to follow you? Should you investigate that? Those are all questions. This particular hospital had a Twitter. Notice the commonality of the little character, right, with the thermometer, right? Healthcare can be easier. And they're talking about Edwards. They don't have a hell of a lot of followers, 1,600, but that's pretty good, decent, right? How many businesses you're after have Twitter feeds? What's your strategy to talk to them on Twitter? Should you talk to them on Twitter? What are they saying on Twitter? Who's their audience on Twitter? All you have to do on these social media channels is click followers, and you can see who's following them. You can get ideas on who you should be following. This is very important for what you're doing in business. YouTube, they have YouTube videos that talk about what they're doing to make sure everybody is safe. And that's good. You know why? Because they're a hospital. And you know why that's important? Because they have to talk about the virus. We got our vaccines the other day at a hospital, at Rush, right, in Chicago. You have to do that if you're a hospital. Do you have to do that? You have to do that in the extent that you're a designer. If you go visit a home, you want to tell them about the precautions you take, right? You have to do that if you're an architect and your office isn't open and you want to talk to them either virtually or you have to go scope out the building. What are you going to do? How are you going to get into the building? That's part of overcoming fear. And this will be explained to you on not only their websites, but on their social media channels. LinkedIn is his gift to all of us for business. What is your strategy on LinkedIn? What is your customer strategies on LinkedIn? Who's their audience on LinkedIn? You can see all of this on these social media channels. Ladies and gentlemen, it's there and it's yours for the taking. You have to gather that information to help you hatch your own strategy in business. Pinterest and Instagram, the same thing. If you're using them, that's great. But what is that gaining you? Seriously. What do you think a post on Instagram will gain you? What do you think it will gain you? Will it be, in fact, more customers? I don't know. Will it? Are you gaining business in Instagram? Or are you just talking to other designers? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Google. If you Google Edwards Hospital and architecture or interior design, Google will tell you what's going on in architecture with this hospital. Are you part of those pieces of business? It'll even give you the architect who's doing the work. This is your competition. What are you doing differently than that architect if you're an architect? This is all information that is available to you now before you even pick up the phone and call them. So, if people are going online more and more and more, if 64% say YouTube will increase, if 63% say their FaceTime will increase, ladies and gentlemen, there's only 24 hours in a day. I have a steady offer of $50 to anybody who will give me the 25th hour. So far, no takers. You only have so much time. You have to figure out where to put that time, how to put that time, and what do you expect to get back for that time. If posting in Houzz you think is a great thing and it has delivered you business, Bravo. I don't know that's true. I do know your website is more important than Houzz, because if you go to Houzz, you're giving Houzz the traffic. You're giving Houzz the SEO. You want to give your site the SEO. And you have to turn into an influencer. You cannot be sitting on your hands waiting for business, nor can you just be expending loads of time and gobs of time in these social media channels without expecting a return on your investment of that time. And you have to become an influencer. And the way you do that is by putting content on your website, by using social medias as listening channels, and by really getting on the phone and talking to your customers, engaging them all the time, not just some of the time. So, social media is about listening, not just talking. I've been doing the talking. Let's see if we got any questions. I'm looking. Oh, Robin is asking, why do you feel about Instagram like you feel? Well, that's a great question. I don't have feelings one way or the other. I just know from my experience on Instagram, it's a great posting tool. But I haven't seen or heard of people making necessarily business. I have some, just like on Facebook. Some people swear by it. I'm just telling you right now, on those channels, you're competing with other people just like you. And if you're interested in how to deliver Google first page results, it's not on Instagram. It's not on Instagram, okay? It's on Google. And to get to Google page one, you need content on your website. You need pages on your website. I have another webinar on internet and why that's important. But if you really want to know, just try to Google something you do and see what Google gives you. That's where people are going. That's where your prospects are going. That's when people want to check you out, they don't go on Instagram. Some may do, but they don't. They go on Google or on your website. Your website has to be your showcase. Your website should expose your core, Robin. Your core group. I don't know if you're a big company or a small company, how many people you have. I'd have to do some research on you. But you really want to understand that people are coming to your website and you only have nanoseconds to hold them. I use a reverse IP lookup code on our websites and our clients' website to see how people who hit our websites react. I know to the second how long they stay. I know what they look at. I know when they leave. And that helps me formulate better strategy on what to put on my website to keep them there. You want to have what they call stickiness on your website. Not on social media channels. You want social media channels to talk to people, like I gave you the example of Travis Kloler, right? You want to talk to, I talk to people on Twitter all the time, but it's conversation. It's not necessarily business. My clients follow me on Twitter. Most of them, some of them, right? And I know if they're following me, I know when I tweet, I'm talking to them. They may not see every tweet, but I'm talking to them. That's why you cannot use these social media channels for personal things. You got to use it for business. You can get personal sometimes, but you want to avoid that and just be a thought leader in your business. Talk about your business. It does work. If you looked at my LinkedIn page, okay, it does work. I've posted things on there that I can't believe I get the results I do. And they're just basically things I've learned along the way or listening at a webinar, because people don't have the time to be everywhere. You have to be everywhere. Any other questions? Oh, let's see. Let's see what happens. Hold on. Give me a second, ladies and gentlemen. So to get to your website on page 1 of Google search means increasing the content and information. Ricardo! Exactly right. Ricardo's question was, to get the website on page 1 of Google, you must increase your content and information. You are correct. As an example, sometimes when you search for things or products or whatever you're searching for and you look, forget the ads for a moment, because people buying AdWords are just making Google rich, and you don't want to do that. You want to be found through what they call organic search. But if you Google something like, I don't know, furniture, bamboo furniture or whatever, you're going to see Amazon right up there. If you really want to know, Amazon has hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pages. That's why they're on page 1. The way you compete with an Amazon is to have content about what you're talking about, bamboo furniture. Bamboo furniture is great in southern climates. That's a topic that may or may not bring up Amazon. I don't know. But if you wrote a blog about that, titled like that, I guarantee you shouldn't guarantee in my business, but I guarantee you after perhaps 4 to 6 months, you would be on page one. Just like never lower your price is on page one. I didn't ask Google to put it there. I put it there because people are interested in that topic. And I blogged about it. The way I learned this, Ricardo, okay, I don't want anybody in the audience to necessarily laugh, but the way I learned this is by one of my first blogs, Conversation from Hell. I wrote a blog called Conversation from Hell, which was a dialogue between me and a magazine media rep that just didn't get it. Just didn't get it. I was so incensed afterwards, I wrote this blog. And then 4 months later, I'm looking at this and I Google it, and it's number one on page one. And the basic blog is Conversation from Hell. If you Google those words today, not that anybody would do that, but if you do that, I'm number one, page one, and there's no Google ads. You know why? Nobody buys those words. Why? Because the devil doesn't need any help. He's got plenty of business, right? So you don't have to pay Google to see that blog. But Conversation from Hell is how I started to learn about SEO, headlines, content. In fact, I've had major publishers that I've pitched in the past ask me point blank, Jim, how much do you pay Google to be on page one with that? And I tell them, this is my white lie, I can't tell you, it's enormous. I don't pay a dime. When you're on page one, number one, because Google puts you there in the organic search, Google is doing that because it helps them, because they're selling words around that topic. That's why they put you on page one. So yes, Ricardo, thank you so much for your question. Anyone else? Oh, my time is short. Listen, if you have questions, before I tell you the contact information, a quick word from our sponsor. Remember, visit kbresource.com, kb-resource.com. And also, there's the editor's address. Send your information to there. They're always growing their website. Check them out. I think you'll enjoy it. Okay. Thank you. On behalf of everyone here at Interline, I really hope you got something out of this hour. If you have any questions, there's my email address, jim@interlinegroup.com. If you need help with your certificate or such, you can email me or sue@interlinegroup.com. The people who, the person who sent you this invitation. You can call 847-358-4848, 847-358-4848. If you go to interlinegroup.com/evaluate, I'll send you all my guides. Fill out the form. You can follow me on Twitter. And our next live webinar will be May 11th on staying in front of your customers in a digital environment, COVID digital environment. This is our first webinar we did 5 years ago, updated. I think you'll get it. Ricardo, do I need to request a certificate through email? Yes, Ricardo, you can do that. You're very welcome. Thank you for attending. Thank you. Thank you, Donna. These are online webinars. You see the second blue box on the left? Those are online webinars. You can take those for more credit if you'd like, including the one that's going to be live on May 11th. Remember, I change them, I record them, I post them, but then once I do a new one, I replace that recording. I like my content. Thank you so much for being here. I like to refresh my content, I should say. I like my content, but I like to refresh it. I really appreciate it. Hope you stay safe. Hope you get business. Remember, I am open to dialogue. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just want to help you make business, right? Although I am selling our information and how we do it. But that's another point of view. You're professionals like I am. I want to help architects just get out of this crazy world we live in and start doing business. Thank you so much. Have a great day.